Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Irvine with Imagine Science Films. Thank you for joining us today on another edition of the Experimenta series. Today with us, we have artist Julia Buntaine. So thank you for being here with us, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So to get started, how did you start with this type of work? I know that you got a degree in cognitive neuroscience, and you also studied fine art. How did these things come about to go together?
It was kind of out of necessity. So I had always done art. I went to an arts high school. It's always been a big part of my life, and no artist can really describe why they started making it because it happened so long ago. We don't even remember. But it's always been a part of my life. And when I went to college, I went to Hampshire College, and at Hampshire they allow you to design your own major. And so you can be pretty creative with how you spend your time. And I went there knowing that visual art wasn't the only thing that I could or wanted to do. I felt like there were some things I hadn't explored yet. So I kind of stumbled into an Intro to Neuroscience course, and it really just clicked in a way that things hadn't previously. Like, I had obviously taken biology and chemistry in high school, and I thought they were just so boring. Like, I'm ashamed about how boring I thought they were. But yeah, learning about the brain was just, it really made sense to me in terms of, I just loved learning about the way that I work and why I have the perceptual experiences I do. Maybe it's because I'm a visual artist that I think more about that sort of thing, and so learning that was even more, was even a deeper experience. But so anyway, so that's when I started taking neuroscience classes, and I got super into the biology and molecular, cellular biology of neuroscience. And I was still doing art, and I was still taking art classes pretty seriously, mostly sculpture at that point. And it came to a head when I was a junior, and I had to decide what I was going to do for my senior thesis. Like I said, at Hampshire, you design your own major, and the whole culmination of that is basically a year-long thesis project where you don't take classes. You just have to do a really awesome project, whatever it may be. And you have advisors and stuff, and they make sure you're on track, but it really is up to you. And so yeah, so I was kind of grappling with, like, oh, well, do I pursue art? Do I pursue neuroscience? Like, I can't just keep doing a double major for the rest of my life. Like, you can't go to art grad school while you're going and getting your PhD. You have to kind of choose one over the other. And that's when I realized that, art is what I'm good at, and it's what I like to do. Science is what I like to think about. And then, that was at the very beginning. I was just beginning to understand, like, what it is to explain scientific concepts visually. And my thoughts about it have become much more sophisticated since then. But back then, it was a world-opening idea to me. And so I started to sculpt some brains. I didn't know where else to start. Yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. I couldn't choose between the two, and so I chose my version of both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Do you ever, because when people hear art and, like, neuroscience, they think, like, whoa, those things, don't really go together, or, like, how do they go together? Do you ever feel like you were pushed in one way or the other, and, like, how did you kind of find your own path to like where you are now?
Yeah, I've always, since I kind of, in a way, I did choose art academically because that's what I chose to get my graduate degree in, which I just finished like a month ago, so that's great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be out of school. But yeah, you encounter some problems when you try and do cross-disciplinary work, because it's not really built into our educational system. I mean, at Hampshire is a very special place where you can kind of just do whatever you want as long as you do it well. But going to like an arts grad school and doing science stuff was like pretty weird. And what I've had to do, and you know, this is what a lot of people I know in the art science world have to do, is just, you know, become their own teacher of science and make sure you keep up on all of the news and the recent studies, and you know, you just have to do that on your own. I have a lot of friends in the scientific community who did choose science, and so that really helps too. And yeah, so it's a little, you know, it's a little hard at times, but it's just like any other subject matter when it comes down to it. You know, you just have to keep up on it, whether you're making art about like war or, I don't know, women's rights or like cupcakes. You know, you have to know everything about your subject matter. So yeah.
Cool. Well, you showed us this image of the brain sculpture before. Could you explain a bit about how that came about or the impetus for that artwork?
Oh yeah, I can bring that up. So this is, there we go. This is the first, I call it officially the first neuroscience-based sculpture I ever made. I kind of played around with some stuff before that, but this is the first one that I'm really proud of. And I had been trying to make brain forms, and I had been kind of just sculpting it with my hands, not really getting the dimensions and all the folds quite right, and I became frustrated with this process. And you know, since I love science, I love to be accurate, and so I wanted a way to make a brain that was anatomically correct. And so my teacher and I, here, I'll quit this screen share now. My teacher and I came up with a method to size up an anatomical model of a brain. I had a model, which you know, you can buy from a scientific supply store or something, and I made a mold of it out of rubber, and then I poured plaster in the mold, so I had a plaster brain. And I cut up the plaster brain into slices, and then I enlarged those slices by tracing them out on a piece of graph paper. And then I had big foam boards, and I made the graph on the foam boards, only I sized it up like 10 times. So basically, I cut out the slices in foam much larger, put the foam slices together, and then I had a brain, kind of. There are a few things that went wrong along the way, but this piece was one of my favorite because up to that point, it was definitely the most ambitious thing I had ever done, and I didn't even know how ambitious it was going to be. The artist part of me didn't really do the calculations like all the way through, and so, you know, I thought maybe it would be like, you know, like this big, this big. It ended up being 5 feet in every direction, and I covered it in concrete as the outer layer, and so it ended up being about 400 pounds.
Oh wow! And
you know, we encountered every sort of problem. I worked very closely with my teacher on this. It was a real learning experience in sculpture. Like, oh, when you make something, make sure you can fit it through the door frame of the building that you made it in. Like, very important lesson. Hopefully you learn in undergrad. But yeah, so I like I said, I really wanted to make something that was anatomically accurate. You know, having the science in my work be representative of the truth of the studies. It's very important to me. Because my work is really based on science. It comes straight from it. And so that was really the first time I did that. And then on the surface of the brain, I carved some neural networks that kind of like reference constellations and connectivity, etc. And I was able to leave it on my college campus for about, I think for like 4 years or something. It was really amazing. They had no system in place to get rid of it, and so it stayed there for a while. It was supposed to be really temporary, and I I had to move it eventually this past winter, actually, and now it's sitting on my parents' lawn.
Oh, wow. That's lovely.
Yeah, it basically is like a big brain rock on their lawn. I don't know what I'm going to do with it next. It needs a new home, so I'm kind of on the prowl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Very cool. And so, do you want to talk a bit about kind of your recent works? I know that we saw on your site you had some things that were kind of still in progress, and just things you're working on now.
Yeah. Let's see if I have any of these up. I'm looking for the link. I don't have it up here.
Okay. Maybe I can share a shot. One moment.
Sure.
Okay. Here that is. Let's see if it goes. Aha.
Yeah, okay. Either of the top two, those are really recent.
Yeah. So the raw feels.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting piece because you kind of deal with how like lots of your work kind of deals with how the eye perceives different situations, and I know that you said in this piece that photos don't really do it justice, and then you kind of had to be there to experience it fully. What was kind of the impetus or what you were going for with this art piece?
Sure. Yeah, so this is the big brain I just showed you, like I said, was my first piece, and then this is my most recent one. So you can see kind of how much things have changed visually, although the ideas have really stayed the same. I decided a while ago to just make the piece in whatever medium seems the best fit. So I used to be really sculpture heavy, and now I'm just like, I'm an artist. I make it out of whatever the concept requires. So for this concept, I needed a piece which was phenomenological, meaning it was really about the experience of being in it. So that's why photographs don't do it justice, although they're kind of artworks in themselves because they're really wild photographs. Everything is bright red. Yeah, so one of the ideas that I come back to again and again are the different mechanisms of consciousness. Consciousness is something which, of all the different ways to think about the brain cellularly, or you're thinking about the micro, biology and the molecular biology, all of that stuff I really love. But then there's this whole other thing of consciousness where it's more about the theory of mechanisms than the actual mechanisms, simply because it's such a mystery still. And so this piece was actually inspired by the work of David Chalmers, who is a philosopher of mind. He's one of these wild philosopher types who has really long, crazy hair, but he's completely brilliant. He works at NYU. And he thinks a lot about consciousness, and he doesn't do any research of his own. He's just a really great philosopher. So one thing he realized, and he's not the only one who realized this, but he kind of gave it a name, as it were. There is this whole subjective experience of consciousness that we have, which isn't really explained by any of our biological mechanisms that we have identified thus far. So by this I mean, when we see the color red, for example, we know how our eyes perceive it. We know what rods and cones do. We understand how it gets to our visual cortex. We can identify the cells in the visual cortex that process the color red. We know that it goes to other areas of the brain after that visual processing, which make associations with emotions or what have you. But there is this feeling of seeing the color red, which isn't really in any of that. And if you're having a hard time of understanding what I mean, think about the feeling of seeing the color blue. Like, that just feels very different. We're talking pure subjectivity here. And this, this quality of consciousness can be extended to any conscious experience. Colors are just the easiest thing to think about. But, think about the feeling of being in love. It's not the feeling of seeing the person's face and the way you, identify their facial structure and the way that's processed in your brain. It's something much more and something much richer than that. And notably, it's very hard to describe. It only is what it is. The feeling of seeing the color red is exactly that and nothing else. So I really just, and that's the most common example in the literature, is this feeling of seeing the color red. So I just wanted to kind of give people that experience in an overwhelming manner. So I converted my studio into a red room. The lights were red, the walls were red, everything in there was red. And people had a really interesting variety of reactions, which, red is a very powerful color. It's anger, it's lust, it's love, it's Valentine's Day, it's blood, it's life. It's like all of these contradictory things. So some people went in there and they thought it was just a nice space to be in, and they felt comforted. And other people went in there and had, anxiety attacks. I personally liked it in there, but that's because it was my piece, so it was hard for me to be objective.
You had some sound too as well, right? Like some red noise.
That's right. Yeah, I wanted to kind of further incubate the space, because it was in the studio environment in school. It's like you're basically in a glorified cubicle, so it takes a lot to create an enclosed installation. So yeah, I was trying to think, for like 2 months I could not figure out what a red noise would be, because I had the red hots in there, which are this candy, if you don't know what they are. And I was like, well, yeah, they're kind of like cinnamon spicy. That's like what red tastes like, as far as I can tell. So I was looking for some kind of red noise, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll play a song about red, or, there's like the Woman in Red song, and there's like so many things. But they were all way too specific, and they conjured up too many things of their own. And so I figured out that white noise, which is the thing on your television when it goes all fuzzy, that's just one bandwidth of that kind of randomized noise. Red noise is all of the lower bandwidth sounds. And so I thought, yeah, I'll play that. And I played it pretty loud. Not so loud you couldn't talk to another person, but it was noticeable and a little weird. And weird is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my thesis project. And that was definitely the only thing I've ever done like that. But I hope I get the chance to do it in the future, and, in a gallery setting where things could be tweaked a little different, or, if I could do a whole gallery installation where there would be like the red room, and then the yellow room, and then the purple room, and do all of that. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah.
Someday.
Yeah. So you said that you kind of the first artwork that you showed us was like a sculpture, and then this, would you consider this more of like an installation? And do you feel like the medium in which you would like to work has kind of been changing or evolving, or do you just kind of feel like you choose whatever medium fits the piece or what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I definitely had I had some struggles in figuring that out over the past 5 or so years. I identified as a sculptor, for a long time. I was really into materials, and I worked in concrete for a year just to do it.
Wow.
I'll never do that again. It was so heavy and dusty. Really good experience though. But I used to be really into materiality. Needs to play a larger role in my work, and what I started to realize, and it took me a couple years to figure this out, but what I started to realize that was my ideas were getting more complicated. Like the last idea I just explained to you is even though it's a very simple thing, everyone knows what it is, the feeling, seeing the color red. It's a philosophically complicated idea. You know, the more complicated an idea is, the more the materials need to be exactly right. So, you know, I couldn't have made that piece out of cardboard. It just wouldn't have made any sense. Or concrete, for that matter. But yeah, so I eventually decided to adopt a kind of form follows function attitude with making my work, which has led me to make pieces out of materials that are totally new. I did a photograph a couple months ago, which was definitely the first photograph I ever did, and it was large format, and which had its own, you know, complications, but it was exactly what it needed to be. And so I've very much let go of the kind of material obsession I used to have. Not that it's, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that, just with the ideas that I have, they're far too complicated that if you have a material which doesn't quite match it, then just the piece doesn't really work out that well.
Right.
So that's been interesting. I think that a lot of artists end up going through this process. Definitely in graduate school, I saw it happen to a lot of my peers too, where you come in as an oil painter and it's like your thing, and then by the end of it, you're just like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll do a performance tomorrow. Like, why not? Yeah,
that's definitely like the great part about school and evolution of, you know, your style and everything like that. But you also have another creative outlet, which is your Sci Art in America BioArt magazine.
Yes.
That's very impressive. Could you talk a bit about that, how that came to be, and just did you see that like the genre was lacking this type of magazine, or did you want to bring something new to the field, or what was the reason for this?
Yeah, basically all of the above. I just graduated from the School of Visual Arts in New York, and I didn't live in New York before that. I kind of lived up and down the East Coast. So upon moving to New York for graduate school, I was like, oh my God, I'm finally going to be around other artists who base their work in science. Like, no matter like who you are or what you're up to, you figure you'll find other people like you in New York. Right. And I did find other people, although it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. You know, there are 8 million people there. I'm like, where are these other science artists? Who are they? How do I find them? And so I was sitting, I was actually in graduate school seminar when I was a first year, and I was just sitting there daydreaming. I'm like, how do I find these people? Like, I keep Google searching, like, science and art plus New York, just every iteration of that. And I did find some stuff, and I did find some people, but I didn't really find what I was looking for, like a real resource, which would kind of bring everything together. And so that's when I decided to make the magazine. And I didn't act on it until the summer after that. So this is summer of 2013. But I've had a strange and kind of secret parallel career in publishing my whole life, just totally by accident almost. I was on my college newspaper because I just wanted to be a part of something, and I ended up becoming an editor and doing a lot of layout there. And then I worked for an online magazine when I lived in Philadelphia, which ultimately ended up failing, but I kind of got the gist of what it was to run a magazine that was in a kind of interesting format, like only online. And yes, that's when I decided to create it. I knew I could pull it off by myself at the very beginning. I knew I could put together at least one issue by myself. I mean, it was a ton of work. And the first issue was, it lacks a lot the other issues have now that I have like 10 people working for me. Mm-hmm. And so when I started my second year at school is when I started to look for writers and other people to work with me on it. And I found so many people who were either science artists themselves or science writers interested in the subject, or just young writers who wanted more experience in journalism. And through the magazine, I have met just so many people, and it's been an interesting experience because I like when I'm at a function, when I'm at a networking function or something, I meet more people when I talk about the magazine than when I do about my own work, because I'm one of a bajillion artists in the world. So many people are artists, but with the magazine, like, I can get them publicity, which makes them want to talk to me more. And I mean, that's why I created it. I want to give people publicity, and I want to get the word about science art out there in a major way. And so it's been a really, really great experience, and I've been so happy to really get to know all of the artists that I feature every other month, doing the interviews, and I still do a lot of the jobs within the magazine, even though I also run it, but I wouldn't give that up just because I enjoy it so much. And yeah, so we've been around for almost a year. We publish every other month. We just put out an issue yesterday, so now I can take like a week-long break from that before getting back to it.
Do you include like articles and like art pieces, or what type of things do you include?
Yeah, so the backbone of the magazine, the kind of set that is always there, are these 3 or 4 artist interviews. I really, having been involved with art so long and learning about artists, I'm sick of reading about artists. I want to read what artists have to say about their own work instead. It's often much more interesting, because they say things which no one else would even know to think to ask. And so yeah, I choose 3 or 4 artists to do these pretty long interviews with, and I tell them, send us pictures of whatever work you want to get out there. If it's new or if it's just unpopular for some reason, like, this is really a chance for you to talk about and show what you want to. And so there's those, and then we do a lot of little, like, short features, either about a local theater company that does kind of like consciousness-based productions. That's one example. Or we recently profiled a woman who was commissioned by NASA to do paintings for NASA documenting the space age explorations, and so that's really cool. But those are shorter, and then we also have a number of articles each time, mainly our first one, the on-topic article, which explores a concept in depth and is really pretty word-heavy over picture-heavy. So we've explored concepts like, what does it mean when a scientific image is displayed in a gallery? What does it mean to elevate a microscope picture to art, even if the person who made it doesn't call himself an artist, but other people end up calling it art. We also did an investigatory piece about the place of science art in the art world in New York. We went around to a bunch of galleries. We asked every single science artist we knew, like, who are you represented by? How do you get shows? Blah, blah, and we kind of found what we thought we would find, which is that science art is on the fringe of the art world. It's been on the fringe for like 40 years, and who knows how much longer it'll stay there. But it was really interesting just to actually do an analysis on that. And so yeah, so we try and explore bigger topics. And like I said, I have about 9 people working for me, and they're regular contributors, but we take submissions all the time. This past issue, I think we had 2 or 3 guest contributors, and those are always really wonderful. The most recent article, the on-topic article we published, was by a guest contributor, and it was all about this idea he had to create an interactive installation, which would be in a museum, which embodies the experience of the Krebs cycle, or the citric acid cycle, that you fear learning about in chemistry. And so he had this whole detailed idea about how this could become an embodied learning experience. And you know, so like that kind of stuff too.
That sounds amazing. Very cool. So I think we're close to wrapping up. Thank you so much for being with us, Julia. You're definitely an example of someone who, you know, didn't quite fit into certain boxes. You just paved your own way, which is amazing. Can you just say a few quick words if you have any upcoming shows or anything that's happening soon?
Do I have any upcoming shows? No, that's one thing I need to get on. I need to start applying for shows. I will say a quick word about the Science Art Center, which I'm opening. I'm in the middle of starting a nonprofit, Nightmare. It's a great nightmare. You know, it's all very good, but it's a ton of work. And so basically, this opportunity fell into my lap, a physical space, and I'm starting a science art think tank there. It's very much an extension of the magazine. It's just in physical form. It's a place for scientists and artists to come together and meet and collaborate and experiment and show their work and give talks. And we're also going to host events, blah, blah, blah. It's in Manhattan. We have a website. It's sciartcenter.org. And we're just getting started. We started working on this a couple weeks ago. So, you know, in the magazine, we'll kind of become a part of that as its publication. So, yeah, hopefully big expansions soon.
That sounds amazing. We'll definitely look out for that. Okay, well, I think we're going to end now, but thank you so much for being with us again, and make sure to stay tuned for the next ISF event. Thank you.
Yes, I look forward to it.
Yes. Okay.
Bye.